I'm Anya, 34, female, and as I stood in the gleaming marble lobby of the Serafina Grand, my family just handed me the key to a glorified broom closet for our annual trip, completely unaware that I own the entire hotel. The key card felt flimsy and insulting in my hand, a physical representation of my place in the family hierarchy, an afterthought. My brother, Ethan, 3 years my senior and the perennial golden child, clapped me on the shoulder with a little too much force. "Don't get lost on your way, Anya," he said, a smirk playing on his lips. "I think your room is down past the kitchens. You might be able to get a staff discount on breakfast." His wife, Chloe, tittered beside him, adjusting the strap of her designer handbag. "Ethan, be nice," she said, though her eyes were anything but. "Someone has to keep an eye on the service elevators. It's an important job." My parents, Richard and Carol, were already engaged in a loud conversation with the concierge, dropping names of their country club friends and asking about the best tables at the hotel's five-star restaurant. They hadn't even glanced at the keycard I was given. To them, my accommodations were a settled issue, a detail as insignificant as the dust on their expensive shoes. They were paying for their suite, Ethan and Chloe were paying for theirs, and I was paying for mine. Yet, somehow, they had collectively decided my money was worth less. This dynamic wasn't new. It was a well-worn path, a groove carved into our family fabric by decades of casual, consistent dismissal of me and my choices. My entire life has been lived in the shadow of Ethan, the brilliant lawyer. He went to the right schools, got the right degrees, and married the right woman from the right family. He was a sturdy oak, and I was, in their eyes, a wildflower they couldn't figure out how to prune into shape. I remember my high school graduation party like it was yesterday. The entire event was less a celebration of my diploma and more a pre-celebration of Ethan's acceptance into a prestigious law school. My cake, which I had picked out myself, had "Congratulations, Anya" written in one corner, while the rest of the frosted expanse was dominated by the logo of Ethan's future university, painstakingly rendered in icing. My father gave a toast that evening. He spoke for 10 minutes about Ethan's bright future, his legacy, and his intelligence. He ended by raising his glass and saying, "And to Anya, who also graduated, we wish her luck in whatever she decides to do." The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken disappointment. I had just been accepted into a top-tier hospitality management program, a passion I had nurtured since I was a teenager, but to them, it sounded like I was aiming to be a professional pillow fluffer. A few years later, after I'd graduated at the top of my class, I took a job as a concierge at a five-star hotel in the city to learn the business from the ground up. I was proud of the work. I was making connections, learning the intricate dance of high-end service, and saving every penny I made. I made the mistake of sharing my excitement during a family dinner. Ethan had just made partner at his firm. He swirled the wine in his glass, a look of profound boredom on his face as I described helping a guest secure last-minute tickets to a sold-out opera. "So, you're a professional direction giver now?" he'd snorted. "That's quaint." My mother had jumped in, her voice dripping with false concern. "Anya, darling, it's a fine little hobby, but you can't possibly be thinking of this as a career. Your father and I are worried. What will people think?" What would people think? That was the family motto. Their world was a fragile ecosystem of appearances, and I was a constant, unpredictable variable. That Christmas, the difference in their perception was wrapped and placed under the tree. Ethan received a gleaming platinum watch, a partner gift, they called it. I received a small, soft package. Inside was a best-selling self-help book titled, "Find Your Fire, Turning Your Passion into a Profession." The irony was so sharp it could have cut glass. They saw my passion, my actual burgeoning career, as something I still needed to find. So I stopped talking about it. I let them believe I was drifting. I let them think I was a concierge, then a front desk manager, then an assistant hotel manager. They saw it as a slow, meandering path to nowhere. They didn't see the business plan I was writing in my tiny apartment late at night. They didn't see the meetings I was taking with private investors who saw potential in my vision for a new kind of hotel, one focused on personalized, understated luxury. They didn't see the moment the first bank loan was approved, or the day I signed the papers on my very first property, a rundown motel I planned to gut and transform. And they certainly had no idea that, 6 months ago, I had closed the deal on the Serafina Gran. The very hotel we were standing in. It was the flagship of my now thriving, secretly owned hotel chain. I hadn't told them. I wanted to wait for the right moment, a moment I could prove that my hobby was more successful than Ethan's prestigious career. I thought maybe I'd tell them over a celebratory dinner, in my own time, on my own terms. But now, holding the keycard to room 113, a room number I knew was located in the oldest wing, directly adjacent to the main laundry facility, I realized the time for a polite, gentle revelation was over. They hadn't just given me a bad room. They had, in their own petty way, tried to put me in my place. They had looked at this palace of luxury and decided I belonged in the basement. I looked up from the keycard. My family was now laughing with the bellhop, handing him a wad of cash to make sure their luggage was handled with extra care. They were so absorbed in their own importance, they didn't even notice the look on my face. They didn't see the years of quiet frustration solidifying into a cold, hard decision. They wanted to put me in my place. Fine, I would. It just wasn't the place they were thinking of. The Serafina Grand was designed to inspire awe from the moment one stepped through its towering bronze doors. The lobby ceiling soared 3 stories high, from which a chandelier composed of 1,000 hand-blown glass petals cascaded down like a frozen waterfall of light. The floors were a polished obsidian marble, so reflective they mirrored the celestial artwork painted on the ceiling above. The air smelled faintly of white tea and lilies, a signature scent I had personally selected. To my left, a string quartet played softly in a sunken lounge. To my right, water trickled down a massive, moss-covered stone wall. This was my masterpiece. Every detail, from the thread count of the sheets to the curated art in the hallways, had passed through my hands. Watching my family stride through the lobby, oblivious, was a surreal experience. It was like watching actors on a stage, unaware that the playwright was standing right beside them. "My goodness, Richard, this place is even more magnificent than the brochure," my mother, Carol, exclaimed, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "Ethan, you have such wonderful taste for picking this for our trip." "Only the best, Mom," Ethan replied, puffing out his chest. He glanced around as if he were personally responsible for the hotel's existence. "I made sure to get us the Grand View Suites. They have balconies overlooking the ocean. It cost a fortune, of course, but you can't put a price on family memories." He shot a pointed look in my direction. The implication was clear. His fortune was buying the memories. I was just lucky enough to be invited along for the ride, even if I was paying my own way. The check-in process was a performance of their own making. My father insisted on handling it, striding up to the front desk with an air of command, as if he were a visiting dignitary. The clerk, a young man named David whom I had personally trained, maintained a perfect, professional smile. "Checking in for the Miller family," my father announced, his voice unnecessarily loud. "We have 2 Grand View Suites under the name Ethan Miller. And," he paused, fishing a piece of paper from his pocket as if my name were a foreign word he needed to sound out, "1 standard room for Anya Miller." David's fingers danced across the keyboard. "Of course, Mr. Miller. Welcome to the Serafina Grand. We have your 2 Grand View Suites ready for you. And for Ms. Anya Miller..." He paused for a fraction of a second, his eyes flickering. He knew the room assignments. He knew who I was, of course, every employee did. We had an all-staff briefing 2 days ago about my undercover visit with my family. He was a consummate professional, his face a mask of polite neutrality. "We have room 113 ready for you." "Excellent," my father said, not even registering the low room number. He was too busy being impressed with himself. David slid 3 sleek wooden keycard holders across the counter, 2 for Ethan and my parents, and 1 for me. Mine felt different. It was the standard plastic sleeve, not the embossed wooden holder reserved for suite guests. It was another small, deliberate detail meant to draw a line between us. As my family cooed over their keys and made plans to meet at the rooftop bar in an hour, I walked, with a growing sense of dread and determination, toward the West Wing. The plush, carpeted hallway of the main building gave way to a less opulent corridor. The art on the walls was replaced with generic prints, and the soft lighting became harsher, more functional. I passed the humming, vibrating wall of the ice machine room, then the rhythmic clanging of the laundry facility. At the very end of the hall, tucked away as if in shame, was a door marked 113. I held the key card over the sensor. The light flashed GR. Ian and I pushed the door open. The air inside was stale and thick. The room was, to put it generously, compact. It was a small, windowless box, barely large enough for the single bed that was pushed against one wall. There was no desk, no armchair, no luggage rack. A tiny, closet-sized bathroom was crammed into the corner. The room was designed for off-duty staff during long shifts or for overflow during conventions, a room that was never, ever supposed to be given to a paying guest. It was an insult, pure and simple. I could see exactly how this had happened. Ethan, or perhaps my father, had called the hotel in advance. They would have spoken to a booking agent, explained that one person in their party needed a no-frills room, a budget option. They would have used their smoothest, most condescending tones to ensure I was placed as far away from their luxury experience as possible, all while making it seem like they were doing me a favor by finding a cheaper rate. They had probably paid the standard room rate and pocketed the difference, chuckling about it later. I sat down on the edge of the stiff, thin mattress. The springs groaned in protest. I could hear the loud thump-thump-thump of industrial dryers from the room next door. This was the bottom. This was where they believed I belonged. After all my hard work, after building an empire from scratch, in their minds, I was still the girl who needed a self-help book to find her way. I was still the person who deserved the windowless room next to the laundry. For a moment, a wave of familiar hurt washed over me. It was the sting of 1,000 tiny cuts delivered over a lifetime. But then, something else surfaced. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a strange, liberating clarity. They had finally pushed too far. They had made their opinion of me so painfully, ridiculously clear that it was almost a caricature. And in doing so, they had freed me from any obligation to play along. I stood up, smoothed down my clothes, and walked out of room 113, leaving the door slightly ajar. I didn't even bother to take my small suitcase with me. I wouldn't be needing it. I walked back down the hallway, the rhythmic clang of the laundry machines sounding less like an annoyance and more like a drumbeat, counting down the final moments of my old life. I found them exactly where I expected to, settled into a plush cabana by the rooftop pool, champagne flutes already in hand. The view was breathtaking, a panoramic sweep of the city skyline giving way to the endless blue of the ocean. My mother was taking a series of photos of the view, while Chloe was busily uploading a selfie to her social media, no doubt with a caption about living the high life. Ethan and my father were examining the cocktail menu, debating the merits of a vintage scotch versus a craft cocktail. They looked up as I approached, their expressions a mixture of impatience and mild surprise, as if they'd forgotten I existed. "There you are," my mother said, not looking up from her phone. "We were just about to order. You took your time finding your room." I kept my expression neutral. "My room is fine," I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "But I had a question about the booking." Ethan lowered the menu, his eyes narrowing with irritation. "A question? What kind of question? It's a room, Anya. You put your suitcase in it, you sleep in it. It's not complicated." "I was just wondering why I was placed in the service wing," I said calmly, my voice steady. "It seems like a strange place for a guest." My father sighed, a deep, put-upon sound. "Anya, we discussed this. We were trying to be financially prudent on your behalf. That was the most economical option available. You should be thanking us for saving you some money." "I paid the full standard room rate that was agreed upon," I countered, keeping my eyes on him. "And that room isn't a standard room." This was the moment of truth. This was their chance to come clean, to admit they'd been petty, to offer a weak apology. Instead, Ethan let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound I knew well, the sound of his derision, the auditory equivalent of a pat on the head. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and gave me a condescending smile. "Look, Anya, let's not make a scene. The hotel is very busy. You got a room and that's that. What are you going to do? Complain to the manager?" He paused for dramatic effect, his smirk widening. "What's the matter?" Still playing hotel manager. There it was, the jab, the one-line summary of their entire perception of me. It was meant to sting, to remind me of my place, of my quaint little career. He was referencing my very first job, the one I took to learn the ropes, and using it as a weapon to silence me now. He saw me not as a 34-year-old woman, but as a perpetual intern, playing dress-up in a world I could never truly belong to. In that instant, any lingering hurt I felt was vaporized by a sea. Old, sudden fury, but it was a quiet fury, a focused, diamond-hard resolve that settled deep in my bones. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I didn't give them the satisfaction of an argument. I simply smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a small, tight, private smile that didn't reach my eyes. It was the smile of someone holding all the cards, watching their opponent make a fatal mistake. The change in my demeanor was so subtle that they barely noticed. Ethan just saw my silence as capitulation. He leaned back, satisfied, and picked up the menu again, the matter closed in his mind. "Good," he said dismissively. "Now that that's settled, let's order. I'm thinking we start with the seafood tower." I didn't answer. I just held that small, cold smile for a moment longer. In their minds, I was retreating to my basement room to sulk. They had won. They had put me back in my box. I turned without another word and walked away from the cabana. My footsteps were light, almost silent, on the terracotta tiles of the rooftop terrace. I could feel their eyes on my back, but I didn't care. Let them think they'd won. The game they were playing was over. A new one was about to begin, and they didn't even know the rules. As I stepped into the elevator, I took a deep breath. The faint scent of lilies and white tea filled my lungs, my scent, my hotel. Ethan's question echoed in my mind, still playing hotel manager. No, I thought, as the elevator doors slid shut, sealing me in a cocoon of polished bronze and quiet potential. I'm not playing anymore. I am the owner, and the owner has some changes to make. I didn't take the elevator down to the lobby. Instead, I pressed the button for the top floor, the one marked with a simple, elegant P for penthouse. The ride was silent and smooth. When the doors opened, they revealed not a hallway, but a private vestibule, floored in the same obsidian marble as the lobby. A single, imposing oak door stood before me. I bypassed it, walking to a discreet, unmarked door to the side, which I opened with my master key. It led to the penthouse level's management office, a sleek, modern space with a panoramic window offering an even more spectacular view than the rooftop bar. David, the young clerk from the front desk, was sitting at a console, coordinating with security. He jumped to his feet the moment I entered. "Ms. Miller," he said, his voice a mixture of respect and concern. "Is everything all right? We saw the room assignment. I am so sorry." I tried to explain to the booking agent who called, but he was very insistent on that specific room class. I held up a hand, stopping him. "It's not your fault, David. You handled it perfectly. You did exactly what I asked. You treated me like any other guest. But now, I need you to do something else for me." "Of course," he said, his posture straightening. "Anything." "The presidential suite," I said. "Is it occupied?" He blinked. The presidential? No, Ms. Miller. It's always held in reserve unless there's a specific request." "Good," I said. "I'm making a specific request. It's for me. Please have my luggage, the small black suitcase currently in room 113, brought up immediately. And inform housekeeping that the suite requires turn-down service for one guest tonight." David's eyes widened, but a slow smile spread across his face. He understood immediately. This wasn't just a room change, it was a power play. "Right away, Ms. Miller," he said, a new energy in his voice. He reached into a secure lockbox and retrieved a single, heavy key card made of polished brass. He handed it to me with an almost ceremonial reverence. "Your key to the Royal Serafina Suite." "Thank you, David," I said, taking the key. "Please also do one more thing. Block any attempts from anyone in the Miller party to get information on my room number or location. If they ask, you are to politely but firmly state that guest information is confidential." "Understood." "Understood, ma'am," he said, his smile now a full-blown grin. "Consider it handled." I walked out of the office and back to the grand oak door. I slid the heavy brass key into the slot. With a soft click, the door unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. To call it a suite was an understatement. It was a sprawling, two-story apartment in the sky. The entry hall opened into a cavernous living room with floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, offering a 270-degree view of the ocean and the city. A white grand piano stood in one corner. A fully stocked library with a rolling ladder lined another wall. The furniture was a masterpiece of modern design, elegant, comfortable, and impossibly expensive. I walked through the space, my footsteps silent on the thick, cream-colored rug. I passed a formal dining room with a table that could seat 12, a state-of-the-art kitchen with a private chef on 24-hour call, and a private movie theater with plush velvet recliners. A aiding staircase made of glass and steel led to the upper level. I ascended it, my hand gliding along the cool metal rail. The master bedroom was larger than my first apartment. The bed was a colossal California king, piled high with pillows and draped in sheets that felt like spun silk. One entire wall was a window looking out onto a private terrace, complete with an infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the horizon. The master bathroom was a sanctuary of marble and chrome. It featured a steam shower with 10 different shower heads, a deep soaking tub with a view of the ocean, and a walk-in closet the size of room 113. My small black suitcase was already there, delivered by a swift and discreet bellhop. It looked almost comical sitting in the middle of the vast, custom-built shelving. I walked out onto the private terrace. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. The city lights were starting to twinkle to life below. Down on the rooftop, 5 floors below me, I could just make out the cabana where my family was laughing and drinking, blissfully unaware. They were celebrating their petty victory, feeling smug and superior in their grand view suites. From up here, they looked so small. I sank into a deeply cushioned lounge chair by my private pool. The salty sea breeze felt wonderful on my skin. This was my world. This was the life I had built for myself, brick by brick, deal by deal, while they were busy mocking me. The presidential suite wasn't just a room, it was a fortress. It was a statement. It was the physical manifestation of the gulf that had always existed between their perception of me and the reality. They thought I belonged in the basement. I was living in the sky. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. Let them enjoy their champagne. The night was still young. An hour passed. The sky had deepened to a velvety indigo, and the city below was a glittering carpet of lights. I had taken a long, luxurious shower, changed into a simple but elegant silk lounge set, and was enjoying a glass of sparkling water on my terrace. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Anya, where are you? We have dinner reservations at the Azure in 30 minutes. Don't be late." The Azure was the hotel's premier restaurant, notoriously difficult to get into. Ethan had no doubt been bragging for weeks about securing a table. I typed back a simple reply. "I won't be joining you. Have a lovely dinner." I hit send and placed the phone face down on the table. The reaction would be immediate. I had broken from the script and they would not be pleased. I counted down from 10. My phone buzzed again, and again, and again. A string of texts from my mother, then Ethan. "What do you mean you won't be joining us?" "This is a family dinner, Anya. It's not optional." "Stop being so childish. Get down here right now." When I didn't reply, my phone started ringing. It was Ethan. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let it go to voicemail again. Then my mother called. I silenced the call. I knew what was happening down in their suites. There would be pacing, indignation, and furious whispers. The nerve of her. Who does she think she is? After we went to all this trouble. Their anger wouldn't be about me missing dinner. It would be about their loss of control. I was a pawn who had suddenly moved off the board. About 20 minutes later, I heard a commotion from the direction of the elevator vestibule. A loud, insistent knocking on the main door to my suite. "Anya, I know you're in there. Open this door." It was Ethan's voice, tight with fury. I didn't move from my chair on the terrace. I just took another sip of water and listened. "This is ridiculous," my father's voice now, booming and authoritative. "Anya, open up. What is the meaning of this?" The knocking became more frantic. Then came Chloe's shrill voice. "Maybe she can't hear us. This door is so thick. Who even stays in a room like this?" Then, silence for a moment. I could picture them standing there, fuming, their faces red. They would be trying to figure out their next move. Their key cards wouldn't work. They were faced with a barrier they couldn't bypass with money or bluster. Suddenly, a new sound. A loud thump against the door, as if someone had kicked it. "Ethan, stop," my mother screeched. "You'll damage it." "I don't care," he yelled back. "What is she even doing in here? How did she get in? This has to be the most expensive suite in the hotel." That was the question that would be tormenting them. Not why I was upset, but how I had managed to one-up them. In their world, status was everything. They had carefully constructed a reality where they were on top, and I was at the bottom. The existence of me in this suite was a glitch in their matrix, and it was causing them to short-circuit. I finally stood up and walked calmly to the front door. There was a small, digital peephole with a screen. I pressed the button, and the faces of my family appeared, distorted and angry. They looked like gargoyles guarding a gate. I pressed the intercom button. "Is there a problem?" I asked, my voice cool and even. They all jumped, startled. "Anya," my father roared, "let us in right now." "I'm afraid I can't do that," I said. "I'm rather busy." "Busy doing what?" Ethan spat. "How did you get this room? Did you lie to the staff? Did you steal a key? I swear, Anya, when I find out how you pulled this, you'll be out on the street." The threat was so absurd, so perfectly illustrative of their worldview, that I almost laughed. They couldn't conceive of any reality where I belonged here. My presence had to be the result of a trick, a lie, a crime. "I didn't steal anything," I said simply. "This is my room." "Your room?" Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking. "Don't be ridiculous. This suite probably costs more than you make in a year. We know what you do for a living." That was it, the final piece of condescension I needed to hear. "You're causing a disturbance," I said, my voice losing its warmth and becoming chilled steel. "I'm going to have to ask you to return to your rooms." "You're going to ask us?" Ethan scoffed, moving closer to the door. "You have no authority here, Anya. You're a nobody. We're the ones paying for Grandview Suites. The manager will listen to us, not you." He was about to learn how wrong he was. I ended the intercom communication, walked over to my phone, and dialed the front desk. "David," I said, "it's Anya Miller." "Ms. Miller, I heard the commotion. I have security on standby. What are your instructions?" "The guests in suites 801 and 803 are creating a significant disturbance outside the Royal Serafina suite. They are yelling, and they have been kicking the door. Please send security up to escort them back to their rooms immediately. Document everything." "Right away, Ms. Miller," he replied. I watched on the peephole screen. Less than a minute later, 2 large, uniformed security guards stepped out of the elevator. They approached my family with calm, professional authority. "Folks," one of the guards said, his voice firm but polite, "we've had a complaint about a disturbance. I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the door and return to your rooms." My father drew himself up to his full height. "A complaint? We're the ones who should be complaining. My daughter has locked herself in this suite, and is refusing to come out. The guard's expression didn't change. "Sir, the registered guest of this suite has requested privacy. Please, let's not make this any more difficult." The realization that the staff was siding with me over them hit them like a physical blow. Ethan's face turned a deep, blotchy red. "Registered guest? That's impossible. There's been a mistake. We demand to speak to the hotel manager." The guard simply shook his head. "The hotel manager is unavailable. My instructions are clear. Please return to your rooms now, or we will have to escort you from the property." Defeated and sputtering with incoherent rage, they had no choice but to retreat. I watched them go, their furious, humiliated faces the last thing I saw before I turned off the screen. The silence that followed was blissful, but I knew it wasn't over. This wasn't a fire they would let die out. They would just go back to their rooms and find a different way to burn it all down. The quiet lasted for less than an hour. I knew they wouldn't go to dinner. Their pride had been far too wounded. Instead, they would stew. They would drink from their overpriced minibars, work themselves into a frenzy of indignation, and plot. Their minds, unable to process the reality that I had power, would invent a narrative they could understand. I was an imposter who had somehow fooled the staff, and they were the victims. The call came not from my family, but from David. His voice was tense. "Ms. Miller, I apologize for disturbing you again. We have a serious problem." "What is it, David?" I asked, already sensing what was coming. "It's the guests in 801 and 803. They've been destroying their rooms, and they tried to charge several $1,000s worth of gift shop purchases to your suite." I closed my eyes. Of course. In their minds, if I was just an employee who had snuck into the presidential suite, they could run up a bill in my name. The consequences would fall on me, the lowly hotel manager. I would be fired, humiliated, and they would get away with it. It was petty, vindictive, and breathtakingly arrogant. "What's the extent of the damage?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. David took a breath. "It's bad. Housekeeping reported hearing shouting and crashing sounds. Security did a wellness check. In Mr. and Mrs. Miller's suite, a television has been smashed and a lamp was thrown against the wall. In Mr. Ethan Miller's suite, the damage is worse. It appears they emptied the entire minibar, overturned furniture, and they used a steak knife from their room service tray to slash the artwork." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The artwork in the Grandview Suites was from a local artist I had personally commissioned. Each piece was an original. "And the gift shop?" I asked. "They attempted to purchase 3 designer watches and several high-end leather goods. They told the clerk to put it on the Royal Suites tab. When the clerk refused, citing policy, Mr. Ethan Miller became verbally abusive. It's all on security camera footage." This was the final line. They hadn't just thrown a tantrum. They had deliberately destroyed property and attempted fraud. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. They believed I was a powerless employee they could bully and frame. They had forgotten one crucial detail. I wasn't an employee. I was the owner. And they were destroying my property. "David," I said, my decision made, "lock their keycards. Post security outside their doors. I want you to call the city police department. Inform them that we have guests who have caused significant property damage and attempted theft by deception. I want to press full charges." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ms. Miller, are you certain this is your family?" His hesitation was understandable, but he didn't know the lifetime of context that led to this moment. "I am certain," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "This is not a family matter anymore. This is a hotel matter. Follow standard procedure for destructive and hostile guests. I want them removed from the premises." "Yes, ma'am," he said, the respect back in his tone. "I'll make the call right now." I hung up the phone and walked over to the grand piano. I sat on the bench, my hands hovering over the keys, but I didn't play. I just sat in the silent, opulent room and waited. It took about 20 minutes for the police to arrive. I watched from my terrace as two squad cars pulled up discreetly to a side entrance. The officers were met by my head of security and David, who was holding a tablet, likely with the incident reports and damage photos ready. They disappeared inside. The next 10 minutes felt like an eternity. I imagined the scene unfolding on the 8th floor. The knock on the door, not from a security guard this time, but from a uniformed police officer. The shock on my family's faces. Their blustering, their indignation turning to ice-cold fear as they realized this was not a game. The clicking of handcuffs. The walk of shame down the hallway they had strode down so proudly just hours before. Then I saw them. Escorted by the police, my family was walked out of the side entrance. My father, his face pale and slack with disbelief. My mother openly weeping, her makeup streaked. Chloe trying to hide her face from the hotel staff who had gathered to watch. And Ethan, my brother, the golden child, the brilliant lawyer, looked utterly broken. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, terrified stare. He looked up, his eyes scanning the hotel's facade as if searching for me. Our eyes met for a split second across the vast distance. In his, I saw not anger, but a dawning, horrified understanding. He finally got it. He finally understood who I was, and he understood it was too late. The phone call came an hour later. It was from the local police precinct. I had been expecting it. "Is this Anya Miller?" a gruff voice asked. "Yes, it is," I replied. "Ma'am, we have a Richard, Carol, Ethan, and Chloe Miller in custody here. They were arrested on charges of vandalism and attempted fraud at the Serafina Grand. They're telling us you're their daughter and that this is all a big misunderstanding." The officer sounded tired. "They're asking for you to come down and clear this up. They say you can vouch for them." I took a deep breath. The air in the presidential suite felt clean and cool. "Officer," I said, my voice firm, "there is no misunderstanding. I am the owner of the Serafina Grand. They are my family, that part is true, but they willfully destroyed tens of thousands of dollars worth of my property and attempted to commit fraud. I am the one who pressed the charges. I will not be dropping them." There was a moment of surprised silence on the other end. "The owner, I see. Well, that certainly clarifies things. Thank you for your time, ma'am." He hung up, that was it. The final door had closed. I knew what would happen next. They would have to call a lawyer. A real one, not Ethan, who was in no position to help. They would be released on bail, but not before being processed and fingerprinted. They would have a criminal record. The hotel's legal team would pursue them relentlessly in civil court for the full cost of the damages, which I knew would be astronomical. Their luxury vacation had ended with a booking photo. The next morning, I check. Ed out of the presidential suite. I left it as pristine as I had found it. As I walked through the lobby, several staff members nodded at me with a newfound, profound respect. David was at the front desk. He handed me a folder. "Good morning, Ms. Miller," he said. "The preliminary damage report, and the final bill for their suites, which we will be forwarding to their legal counsel." "Thank you, David," I said. "You and your team handled a difficult situation with exceptional professionalism." "We just followed your lead, ma'am," he said with a small, proud smile. I walked out of the gleaming bronze doors and into the bright morning sun. I didn't look back. I didn't feel the triumphant glee I thought I might. I didn't feel a thrill of victory or the satisfaction of revenge. Instead, what I felt was a profound, quiet, and immense sense of peace. It was the peace of a weight being lifted, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying for 34 years. The need for their approval, the sting of their insults, the constant, draining effort of trying to prove my worth to people who were determined not to see it, it was all gone, washed away in the chaotic implosion of their own making. They had shown me who they were so completely that there was no room left for doubt, no space for second chances. They had wanted to put me in my place. In the end, they had only succeeded in showing me that my place was far away from them. My place was here, in the world I had built for myself, a world where my worth wasn't determined by their narrow standards, but by my own vision, my own hard work, and my own success. They had sent me to the basement, but in doing so, they had given me the final push I needed to move into the penthouse of my own life and to lock the door behind me for good. So, for anyone out there who has ever been made to feel small by the people who should have lifted you up, my advice is this: stop playing their game. Don't argue, don't justify, don't fight for a seat at a table where you're not respected. Instead, go out and build your own table. Build your own house. Build your own castle. And when they come knocking, you don't have to answer the door. The ultimate success isn't proving them wrong, it's getting to a place where their opinion no longer matters at all.